Hey, what is going on, guys? In today's video, I want to have a conversation about the burst rifle as it's been unvaulted in EZFN, which is Chapter 1, Season 7, and I think it presents a interesting option that is viable and works really well in certain scenarios. So in today's video, we're going to have a conversation about if you're going to run the burst, where do you want to position yourself to maximize its effectiveness? How strong is it compared to the other ARs overall? And finally, wrap up with a discussion of, is unvaulting these weapons a good idea? These, viable options that aren't overly strong, like the heavy shotgun, standard SMG, like should EZFN continue to unvault these more? And with that, let's get right into it. Okay, so the burst rifle is, I think, situationally really good, but also can be very, very inconsistent depending on what position and what range you're trying to use it. Now, I think Project Era Season 5 and 6 presents, a good historical reference, as the burst rifle is effectively unchanged from that. And really, where the burst rifle worked really well back then was in those medium range engagements where you can do a quick peek, fire 3 rounds, and get behind cover. I would say medium range because if you're at long range, the burst rifle is just highly inaccurate with the second and third shot. Well, yes, the first shot would be perfectly accurate. Because you're far away and the burst rifle's bloom is not great, the second and third shot are just going to go sideways and they're very unlikely to hit your target. But at medium range, where, your crosshair, even when it blooms out, is still mostly on target, you can do devastating amounts of damage very quickly with those quick peaks, which is very useful. Now, while I do think the burst rifle is really good in that one situation, honestly, when you try and use the burst rifle to sub into another role, it doesn't work very well. If you have a standard AR, you can kind of sub that as an SMG. The burst rifle really can't do that. The DPS is really low, the lowest of any of the, let's say, 4 competitive ARs. It's not great there. Maybe as a pseudo shotgun early game, it's okay in doing that. And as like a long range peak weapon, as I said, not very good. Even against the standard AR silenced heavy, it doesn't matter. The burst rifle is just not very good in that situation. So I think it's good when you're in the right position, but it's a very situational weapon, and it really demands that you run an SMG to be able to handle those close range fights where you need to spray down a wall. So where does it kind of land compared to the other ARs? I'd really say there are 3 other competitive choices in EZFN: the standard, the heavy, and the silenced AR. There are other ARs technically, like the scoped and the thermal, but I don't think either of those are particularly good. Well, the scoped AR wasn't bad in Project Era Season 8. You have to remember that was post-buff where it got over 25 damage. Still doing 23 and 24. Don't think the scoped AR is particularly good. And the thermal AR makes very little sense when the heavy AR exists. The heavy does almost as much damage at range, but has a way quicker rate of fire, bigger magazine. The thermal doesn't really make sense. So you're down to these 4 choices. I still think your top 2 choices are going to be the standard AR and heavy AR. Both of those excel at their roles really well, and I think they're overall the strongest options. I think the burst rifle kind of lands where the silenced AR is, like a B tier weapon, like still good, not bad by any means, but it's not quite to the level of the scarred heavy. You would probably, it's more competitive against the lower tier ARs, maybe the blue AK. So it's definitely still a decent choice, but not quite a top tier AR. So it's really going to be down to preference, right? All of these ARs are good enough to where you could take them as your favorite, and it's really just down to rarity. It's up to you to decide, okay, which AR fits my playstyle, and kind of think about, okay, maybe I take a gold burst over a blue AR, but I'll take a blue AK over the gold burst, right? It's just kind of down to rarity and which AR you prefer. Now, I kind of want to move for the last part of this video to just talk about why I think unvaulting these weapons is actually a really good idea. The burst rifle unvault just presents yet another choice in the AR meta to open up options, right? It's not the worst weapon, but it's not the best either. It's just a decent, viable choice. And I think that's a really good because it's just making the AR meta more interesting. It's not garbage in the loot pool. It's just, and if you really like the burst rifle, that's a gun that somebody who likes it can use it, but you're not required to use it if you don't like it. And I think this is a good idea. I think other weapon classes like heavy shotgun, standard SMG, right? These are weapons that are not insanely strong, but are decent. And I think these are good unvaults that EZFN should consider unvaulting just to bring more options into the meta, right? And kind of replace some of these garbo items. They vaulted a crossbow. That's a good step in the right direction. Let's get rid of bottle rockets. Let's get rid of the scoped revolver. Either buff that thing to be competitive or get rid of it. Thermal AR, buff it to be competitive or get rid of it, right? We should be trying to get rid of garbage items, either by buffing or vaulting, and make the meta to where it's just guns that are actually reasonably competitive, So no matter what gun you get, it's at least usable, and there's more choices in the meta. And with that, I hope you enjoyed this video, and I'll catch you in the next one.